Hello, this is Lee Cooper, and this is my case study video for AP 858 about Truman Elementary School. Alright, so looking into the case, what are the things that we know? Well, we know that Truman Elementary is a suburban pre-K school. It has around 700 students, so approximately 25 per class based on the number of classes that they said that there were. 50% on free or reduced lunch, 5% are English language learners, and then there are funds available for a grant. And then there's also a very supportive and active PTO, which I think is something that is worth noting. We also know that there are low reading scores, so this is something that's been an issue for the school and has been brought up by the PTO, and we're trying to solve that issue. There's also poor curriculum and instruction that is occurring, so this is also a known that has come up by looking at the report by the district observer. Okay, so what do we need to know? Well, a lot of things that we need to know, I need to know about resources. That's the thing that I feel we're missing the most. So do we have personnel to support individualized instruction? Do we have personnel to support a curriculum change? Do we have personnel to support instructional changes? Are there reading assessments available or utilized, such as STEP or DIBELS? What are student levels? So, again, going along with that reading assessment, do we know what those student levels are? What kind of community resources are there? Alright, and so what's the problem? Teachers lack knowledge of individual student ability. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have in being able to solve this reading issue, is that students are being taught at the same level, and the only real data it seems that we have is just this like state assessment data. These big test data, but it doesn't seem that there's really any other data, and there's definitely not individualized data, at least at this point, that we know of. There's also the reading curriculum is not effective, so that has been clear, both raised by the PTO as well as the administrator who came and observed and wrote the report, so that this is not an effective curriculum. It does not match current practices, research-based practices. There needs to be more time for ELA, so more instructional time. They said that they only get about an hour a day, and they're hoping that they can increase that time, especially when talking about reading. Teachers need effective strategies. So right now, teachers are not differentiating, and they're not teaching to individual students or even to groups of students, but still just kind of teaching the same thing to the whole class. Okay, so what's a proposed plan of action? First of all, I would definitely utilize an assessment system, so either DIBELS or STEP. Next, we would need to have a PD on how to analyze individual student data. So teaching teachers how to look at student data and to look at individual student data. I would do a data deep dive to identify individual gaps. So with teachers, helping them to dig into the data based on the assessment that we did, either DIBELS or STEP, and digging deep into the data and seeing, okay, where is it that students are having gaps specifically, right? Like, what is the specific thing that the student is having issue with? And DIBELS or STEP, and obviously there's going to be like, more tests out there, and they're going to tell you different things, but they should be able to identify some of those gaps for you. And then I would develop a curriculum team, so somebody who's going to be coming together, looking at the gaps, as well as looking at research-based curriculum that exists, and ultimately making a curriculum decision. So identify a research-based curriculum based on those gaps. Okay, so my action plan continued. How does this kind of look more in practice? So in the classroom, I would think classroom libraries, I think, is a really great idea. This is something that I didn't, I kind of thought was just kind of a pain, and it was based on lack of resources because there wasn't an availability of a library. So this is at a school that I recently taught at, and my wife taught at the elementary school. So these classroom libraries, though, it actually was very helpful because students had access to the books right there in their classroom. And if they didn't like a book, then they could go right then and get a new book. Or if they had a book that it was a little bit too hard for them, right there they could go get a new book, and it just was a lot more accessible. And the problem that I think that happens with like libraries, and the problem that I'm having with my students now, is they just don't really have many opportunities to go to the library. And we have a lot of issues with like students in the hallway unattended, and behavioral issues. So like a lot of the time teachers won't send students out, and actually our administration tells us like don't send students, especially like during advisory and those kinds of things. So they're not getting those opportunities to go out and go get a book. So having those classroom libraries, having that availability right there in the classroom to have those books, I think is really big. Also, ELA double black. So this is something, again, that I've seen implemented, is spending a lot more time in ELA class as well as mathematics, actually. So kind of extending that time for those classes and finding where we can cut that time on the other end of things. So whether that's maybe you're cutting out a little bit of another subject, maybe that's like a world study subject or something like that, but cutting down that time a little bit for those other subjects to really focus on those core subjects. I would also say small group and station work. So this is kind of maybe like an example. It's not maybe the best example, but here's an example. So you could have small group station work where you're having guided reading in one spot. So students are reading on their grade level and a teacher is helping them with that reading. So maybe it's something like this small group work or something like, and actually, maybe not the collaborative project, but something like that, the guided reading. You're also having phonics. So this is maybe going to be directly taught by the teacher. And then you could also have Lexia. So utilizing technology, Lexia is a really great tool that will meet students kind of where they're at, identify issues that they have, and be able to help them with those reading levels. So that would be another idea for like a station that students can be working through. And again, this is to help break down students to where they're getting individualized instruction more easily, right? And the other part of that, though, is that this is going to require an additional staff for the coaching needs as well as implementation support. So what I mean by that is that we're probably going to need more than one person in this classroom, especially if you have students, 25 students per class or more, right? It's probably going to be useful to have one more teacher, and if not one more teacher, to have a volunteer or a parent volunteer or something like that. So I'm going to kind of get in that as well. So the next part of my action plan is more about community outreach. So I think there needs to be clear communication and collaboration with the PTO. It's great that the school has a PTO that is writing to them, that is active, and so we should utilize that resource. So definitely communicate and collaborate. That means coming up with the curriculum decision. So, as part of being part of that curriculum team that I mentioned earlier. That also means deciding, just making decisions and allowing input, those kinds of things. That also means allowing partners with parents. So using that PTO as a stepping place to start partnering with parents. And what I mean by that is one of the things I mean by that is that just helping parents to understand the importance of bringing their students' education home. So one of those could be reading logs. So those are something that I've seen utilized in schools that can be really effective. So having students read at least 30 minutes every night, and then having parents log that and sign that, that's going to be really effective to help out those students with reading, especially if they're getting access to the reading material that's on their grade level. It's also a great way to start building kind of these family relationships. So what I mean is parent, student, teacher relationships, and those are things that have been shown to be effective. Okay, and then also parent volunteers. Can we get parents into the classroom to help with that instruction? Can we get parents in the classroom to help students who are struggling with reading, right? Identifying those lower students. Along with that, we can also there's in Colorado, for instance, there's something called reading partners. So, and this is actually just in Denver, but just looking for things like this. So volunteer nonprofit groups and so to give you an example of this one, they have volunteers come into the classroom and they work one-on-one with those really low students. So students who are the lowest of the class, they're going to be able to have one-on-one support throughout the entire class. So do we have those resources in our community? And if not, can we try to build those resources? Can we try to get volunteers into the school that can work with students like that? So I would just say building kind of that culture of volunteerism. One-on-one support for those students. Okay. All right. So how are we going to implement this strategy? So I'm just going to kind of my implementation strategy focuses on my leadership philosophy. So that starts with ownership. How can I, as a school leader, own this problem? How can I know that I have not done enough to help teach my teachers, right? To give them the professional development that they need, to give them the tools that they need in order to teach in a way that is going to be conducive to students reading better. I can also, own that, hey, I should have recognized this problem earlier on before having to be notified by the PTO that there is a problem going on. So really, how can I own this problem and then be open and honest with parents and staff that, hey, this is an issue. I understand that. I'm going to own this problem. This is something I need to fix and really work on that. So building trust and building kind of relationships with parents, students, and staff. Again, just kind of building that trust. Because what that's going to do is help us to be able to manage the change that is going to have to occur, right? And be able to really show teachers this is what the change that needs to occur so that we can serve our students best. And then also ground the efforts in the why. So support students' academic Success and well-being. So, change can be difficult. So how can we help teachers to see that this really is going to support students in the best way? Okay. Oops. So, sorry, the last one was monitoring. So, I would say like quarterly monitoring. So having students take maybe the DIBELS or the STEP test again, because you want to see, are the efforts that you're putting forth actually working? So we need to monitor those efforts. All right, so resolving the issue. So how does my plan serve all students? 1, it identifies individual student needs. 2, it works to support individual student needs. 3, it builds the capacity and the resources of staff. So providing them with professional development on how to do small group and station work and those kinds of things, how to analyze data. So building the resources, the capacity of staff so that they are going to be able to better serve their students on an individual basis, which is obviously very needed. And then also partnering with parents. So that's going to be serving students because you're building those relationships. You're able to, right, like, say like you're having behavioral issues or those kinds of things, right? Like, it's going to really help in the long run to serve all of those students and to get that support, not just in the classroom, but also at home. Okay, so, and then justification. So why do I think that based on the case that was there? So there is a strong PTO, so I think that there is a lot of potential for that parent-student-teacher relationships to support success. Also, like I was saying, building those reading logs. So I think that there is evidence of parent support, so this is how I'm justifying that. There's also a need for individualized instruction. There's also a need for individual student data based on the case, right? Like the case only had that just state test data, and it didn't really have any kind of like deeper data than that. Alright, so feelings and unresolved problems. Some of my feelings of the case. I think that there was a lack of knowledge for me, in the elementary reading, so I was not sure where to go with this case when I first started. So this is why I have a lot of gratitude for the knowledge and ideas of others. So that being, what I mean by that is, I know my wife taught in a school that, they did a lot to work on reading in elementary school. So I talked to her and said, hey, what would you do in this situation? And, I don't feel shameful about that because that's something that I want to be able to do, right? When I'm actually a principal is collaborate with others and, definitely draw on the ideas of others and be able to know that I don't know everything, but hey, I can utilize the resources around me in order to solve these problems. And then I also think that, I also thought it was a little unrealistic for the demographic, right? Having such low reading, kind of like, especially like, the income status, those kinds of things. I would imagine there's going to be a little bit more reading at home, but, maybe not. The other thing I was thinking is I was just surprised by the poor instruction that was occurring, and it seemed like, hey, these problems could be fixed pretty obviously. Okay. So what are the unresolved issues? How will the staff and parents react to the change? Are they going to be able to handle this change and let us move forward? Are there going to be support resources available? So, like I said, trying to pull from resources in the community, trying to pull from the the parent resources, trying to, get more people hired, those kinds of things. Are those resources going to be available? And then also how to ensure continual support and improvement. So, I think this is an ongoing process. And it's not just hey, we're going to try this out this month. This is something that has to be a continual thing, has to be continually reinforced, and has to be continually monitored. So how are we going to ensure that those things happen? Okay, so serving all students through school community relations. I'll try to just run through these real quick. So how did I engage families in the community? Addressing PTO concerns directly, partnering with parents, with volunteers, reading logs, nonprofit community volunteers. So engaging families and community, bringing them into the classroom, and collaborating with them for decision making. Respond and communicate. So I responded directly to the concerns of the low reading scores through the new curriculum, improved and individualized instruction, utilizing strong PTO for communication and collaboration, updating and partnering with parents, positive change. How did I do that? Serving and supporting all students. So that would happen through, again, I kind of already explained that. Utilizing grants. So utilizing the policies and the resources that are around us in order to make change. And then serving Ls through best practices. I think there is a small percent, 5% of the population who are Ls. And, the practices that we're doing here are going to be serving those Ls as well. And that's something that is going to be required by law, right? Is that we're providing those accommodations. And that's through individualized instruction, varied learning strategies, and student talk. So again, with the group work, allowing for more student talk. Alright, so building connections, partnering with PTO and other parents. How also, so the in-school volunteer support, the reading logs, the curriculum decisions, and also how are we also building connections? Strong parent-teacher-student relations, support student academic success and well-being. So this is something that has been studied, and this is how I'm building connections and building that positive change in the school. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much.